Okay, time for lesson number 3 here in week number 3. Hope you're finding everything useful. We're going to dive in a little bit on investigating websites. So there's a couple of basic things that you want to do when you're interested in a website for a story and you want to learn more about it. One is you want to try and figure out any ownership information about it, and the second is you want to see if it's connected to other websites through its Google Analytics code or Google AdSense ID. I'll explain a little bit more about that in a second. Let's talk about finding a website owner. So this is a really great website. It's free. There are some better paid tools, but I want to focus on free tools in this. It's called Domain Big Data. So that's domainbigdata.com. Again, free tool. So there's a search out there called a Whois search. Anytime a website domain name, so domainbigdata.com for example, is registered, it's recorded in a universal database out there. So at any given time, you can do a Whois search, and at the very least, you're going to be able to find out when a domain name was created, and also potentially when it expires. Now, if you're really lucky, there also may be public information about the person who owns it, contact information for them. That's if you're really lucky. But people are able to pay to keep their owner identification information private. So sometimes you're going to run a Whois search and you're going to come with information that says like Privacy Protect LLC, and that's going to tell you that somebody has paid the extra, $5 or $10 to get that privacy protection. All right, so that's our overview. We're going to look in a good scenario here where we actually do get the information about an owner. So let's run our search. We run a search here in Domain Big Data. This is the top of the results page here. Now I just decided to do a search for Newsweek.com. Here's what we get. In the upper section, you can see I have the arrow there. It's giving us the date creation of the domain name. So this domain name was created in 1994. Been around for a long time, which you would expect for Newsweek magazine. And below that, it's just sort of calculating automatically the age of it. So just like social media accounts that are new are a little more suspicious, really new domain names can also tend to be a little more suspicious, especially if they're claiming to be a well-established brand of some sort. So that's the first thing, is we're going to look at when was it created. Second thing that we want to look at here, where the arrow is in the registrant information. So here is, the person or entity that has bought this domain name and is currently holding it. In this case, we're really lucky because we've got, the organization, Newsweek LLC, and Domain Big Data is great because it's telling us that same organization is associated with 98 total domains. And if you were to click on Newsweek LLC, Domain Big Data is going to list them for you. So then suddenly we can see, all right, what else does this company own? And below that, we also have the email associated with the domain name registration. In this case, it's domains at IB Times, which is associated with more than 100 domain names. So I'm going to look at both of those, and I'm going to get a sense of the universe that these companies own. And if I had done more research, I would see that Newsweek and IB Times are part of the same company. So we don't have a case where the organization and then the email address are linked to different companies, which would be a confusing thing we'd need to look more into. In this case, they really are connected with the same company, but we have a different amount of domain names, one with the organization name and two with the email. So you need to look at both because people often register things under different names or different email addresses, and you want to get a whole picture of the universe of all the domain names that they own. All right. Now, the other things I just want to note here is, you get a phone number, it tells you the city, you get an address. This is a really important thing. I'm going to emphasize it right here, is the email address. So when someone buys a domain name, they can put in whatever name they want, whatever address they want, whatever phone number they want. They can put in and make up whatever information they want. So you always have to take this with a grain of salt. But the email, of all of the information that you would find in a public-facing domain registration record, the email is often the most interesting. And the reason for that is, even if you want to make up a name and fake stuff to throw people off the scent, you still, in order to manage your domain name, kind of need an email address where the company you bought it from can contact you. So a lot of times, the email address may be your best lead. Now, it's possible someone just created an email address they'll never use again, and it's only for that domain name. Sometimes it's a dead end, but it's also possible that the email address will actually enable you to get in touch with the person who owns the domain name. So the email is potentially the most useful piece of information in a domain name registration if you think some of the stuff might be fake. And just to give you a sense of what the typical registration listing looks like, this is it. Domain Big Data is nice because it organizes stuff a little bit nicer, but down below that it gives you the basic list. And the thing I want to note here is that I've highlighted the section which has the registrar and the registrant. But sometimes you'll have one name in the registrant section and one name in the administrator section, which is the more technical section. So sometimes you have a company, an entity that owns the domain name, the registrant, and then they have contracted a separate entity to be the administrator of it. So that's why you might find different information between these two. All right, last thing I want to note is a tip about IP address. So the IP address tells you the location on the internet that the server this website is hosted on is. And sometimes if you click on the IP address, it's going to tell you that there's thousands or tens of thousands of websites hosted on the same IP. That's not really useful to you. However, if you were to click on IP address and you only see like 5 or 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 sites hosted on the same IP, that's really interesting. Those potentially could be connected to the same website, to the same website owner. So when you get a domain name record and all the information is private or it's a dead end, look at the IP, because maybe there's only a few other sites on that same server and maybe those other sites have public domain registration information. That's a good clue. And you need to buttress that with other things, but if there's only a few sites on the same IP, there's a decent chance they may be connected. It's not for sure, but they could be connected. All right, let's move on here. I mentioned Google Analytics and Google AdSense. So Google Analytics is a free program that tons and tons of websites use to track the traffic coming to their website. And Google AdSense is a really lucrative advertising network that a lot of websites use to put ads on their sites and earn money. The fact that these two things are so popular and so ubiquitous on the web means that it's a great tool for you to try and connect websites to each other. So I'm going to describe the process and then show it to you. The first thing you're going to do is when you come to a website, you're going to go up and into the menu in your browser and you're going to open up the source code of the web page. I'll show you how to do that. Then you're going to look on that page for the telltale signs that they're using Google Analytics and or Google AdSense. In this case, the letters UA and a dash, or the letters pub and a dash. And then after those letters would be a unique number. And the reason this is interesting is that in order to use Google Analytics or Google AdSense, you have to be assigned a unique ID that's linked to your account. So if we find the same unique ID across multiple websites, that's an extremely strong signal that they are connected together. All right, and then we're going to use a tool called Spy on Web where we paste in the Analytics or AdSense ID and see which other websites are using it. The one thing to note is that you can actually just type in the domain name into Spy on Web, but I discourage you from doing that because sometimes the data in Spy on Web is old and it may pull up an old Analytics or AdSense ID that's not actually on the site anymore. All right, so what am I talking about here? Let's start. In your browser, you go up to the View menu, then you go to Developer, and you go to View Source. On any web page, this will open up a new tab with the source code for that particular web page. And once you have that source code open, that's what this bottom section is down here, you're then going to go up to the Edit menu, Find, and then this little box opens up here. And for example, I typed in UA and dash to find a Google Analytics code. And lo and behold, there was one on the page for this particular website, UA-5426098-7. So that tells us that this website is using Google Analytics. And that's great because then we can go to Spy on Web and take that number right there, search on Spy on Web. Remember, it's spyonweb.com, and we get a result. So the website I was on was conservativetribune.com. It's telling us the domain name, the IP address. It has or had 2 different Google Analytics IDs on it, which is common to find more than one. It gives us a little other information about traffic sources for it, which is a neat little thing to look at, like where is the traffic coming for this website? How are they getting an audience? But the thing that we're really interested in is that we can see other domain names that use these exact same Google Analytics IDs. And if you look at these, this is an excellent indication that these are all part of the same network. So we're able to take disparate websites and suddenly connect them with the same Analytics or AdSense ID. Okay, Let me just summarize a few of the key things, not only in this section, but the previous two as well lessons that are really, really important for you to remember. The first thing is, I'm showing you a bunch of tools. I'm showing you a bunch of techniques, but it does not replace traditional journalism. It does not replace talking to people, interviewing them, asking them questions, bringing the information that I have shown you to them to get them to answer for it. Okay? Really important. When we talked about social media accounts, we talked about investigating the network and the history of an account. Don't just take it for granted. Look at where it exists within the network. Try to find other accounts as well. An overall thing, these last two here, I just want to emphasize to you that when you're on a website, when you're looking at a social media account, you've really just got to have this mentality of I'm going to look at everything. I'm going to click on every link. If I hit a roadblock and the whois information is private, I'm going to look at the IP address. I'm going to look here. I'm going to look there. I'm going to take sections of the text on a website and plug it into Google to see if other websites have the same text. You've got to face these roadblocks and these dead ends and say, I'm going to get around it. I'm going to find another way. So that's the mentality for doing this kind of work. And then the last thing here is I really want you to write this down and bookmark this. http://bit.ly/verificationtoolsandtips.com. This is a place where I am constantly gathering and updating tutorials, tools, the stuff you've seen here, plus a whole bunch I didn't get into. So this is a free resource for you that is always going to be there and always updated with stuff I'm finding. So this is me giving you a personalized guide to it. You can ignore my background falling again. It keeps doing that. So that's a quick summary of a few things I wanted to reinforce. And again, I want to reinforce that if you take this URL and you bookmark it, you're going to have access to great tools and tutorials that I'm always gathering because I'm obsessed with this stuff. All right, so that wraps up our verification piece here, but I've got two other things, two other quick lessons that I want you to see, so looking forward to seeing you in those.